For today's video, I'm going to talk about how to do a proper approach. I seem to get this question all the time, so I'm going to make a YouTube video. I'm going to point everyone to this video as a once and for all explanation. When it comes to approaching, there's a number of strategies you can use. The first thing you have to think about before making any approach is how you think about things, your mindset. You have to understand that when you're approaching girls, it becomes a little bit of a volume game. What this means is you don't have any information about them. You're missing context. You don't know if they like you, etc. Because of this, you have to make sure your mind is in the correct place. You can't go up to her, talk to her, and expect to get results every single time. Girls are really picky, so if you're doing random approaches, you can't expect your success rate to be high. This is what I'm referring to when I'm talking about mindset. You have to have the mentality that she's going to say yes, even though she's most likely going to say no. You have to be able to detach from your ego for that moment of time. When girls like a guy, it's all about the feelings, not just your looks. Even if you look good that day and you approach her in a really nice way, if she's not feeling right, she's not going to say yes. Guys, remember, this can be for a million reasons. I'll list you a few so you understand what I'm talking about. She got in a fight with her parents that day. She did badly on a school exam. She just crashed her car. She only slept 4 hours last night. She already has a boyfriend. Her dog passed that afternoon. She hasn't had her morning coffee yet. The list is essentially endless. So if you make it about yourself, you're playing this entirely wrong. Understand, guys, the mindset is equally as important as the approach itself. You have to fully be okay with either outcome, expecting her to say yes, but understanding that she's probably going to say no. This, of course, is in reference to a cold approach. With cold approach, the results can be random. Later on in this video, I'm going to tell you about warm approach and the things you can do to increase your odds. For now, let's get into how to approach. There's a few different angles you can take when doing a cold approach. The first I typically recommend is to go up to her and make some sort of excuse to talk to her. One of my personal favorites are, you look familiar. So this one's interesting because what you're essentially trying to do is you're trying to build some sort of familiarity by assuming that it already exists. If you tell her that she's familiar, now she's going to think about, oh, maybe I do know you from somewhere. She's going to start talking about, oh, I went to this high school. Maybe I saw you there. Maybe if you're lucky, you went to the same high school and now you have a mutual connection. Now you guys can talk about a teacher you had, principal, janitor, etc. Now you're not always going to get this lucky, but at least you've already broken the ice and now you open the door to reading her body language. I'll get into the body language component after I talk about more approach strategies. The second approach you can go for is the direct approach. You go up to her directly and you say, nice to meet you, my name is. After that, you'd ask her a basic question or you try to see what she says back to you. I usually don't recommend this approach because it puts them naturally into the defensive. For a lot of girls, the first thing they're going to think is, why is this guy talking to me? For a lot of you, this is not going to be the best way to do this because you're going to get awkward, you're not going to know what to say next, and you're both going to leave feeling weird. If you think you have the confidence to pull it off and continue the conversation string, you can try this approach. Otherwise, I'd probably lean to the first one. The last and more niche way to approach is to put yourself around her. This one's more specific, but I'll give you an example of what I mean. Let's say you're in a coffee shop like I always tell you to go to. A girl walks in and she's waiting in line. You see the girl, you think she's attractive, and now you're planning her approach. So this is what you can do. She's going to go up to the front and now she's going to be in the line waiting for coffee, or she'll be looking at the desserts in the display. At that same moment, what you could do is you can immediately go and do the same thing. What you can do once you put yourself in her proximity is you can try to create some eye contact and see if she can respond back to you. If you do make eye contact, you want to throw a casual smile. Generally speaking, they'll do the same back to you. If you feel the energy is correct, what you can do is you can open up some small talk. Some really old school examples are, oh wow, the weather is really nice today. I personally wouldn't use this one. Other examples are local events. Let's say the hockey team in your city won by a landslide last night. The third thing you could do is a little bit more direct. What you can do is you can point out something about her outfit and then mention how you like it. I'd probably pick something that's an accessory, like a watch, shoes, etc. If you manage to do this, you've now opened the door to a conversation that you can then use to break the ice further and maybe get a number. Regardless of how you want to go about this, once you break the ice, you're going to have to look for the same things. Earlier I mentioned body language. When it comes to body language, you have to learn how to be perceptive and understand whether she wants to receive your conversation or not. Typically, I pay really close attention to how emotional they are when they talk to me. When I say emotionality, what I mean is she excited to talk to you? Is she smiling? Does she seem bubbly? Does she seem soft-spoken? If you answered yes to any of these questions, this is a sign to keep going. Another thing I look for with body language is how they're positioned. If you're trying to talk to them and they're looking over their shoulder and they have no intent of turning around to face you, this is probably not a good sign. If this body language is combined with her giving you short answers and not really wanting to continue conversation, you can take this as a loss. Sometimes in these scenarios, you'll notice you'll pull back and they might try to re-engage. In this case, keep going and see what happens. If they turn away and don't give you any signs again, it's probably safe to say she doesn't really want to talk right now. Another thing to look for is what they're doing with their hands. When they're a little bit nervous to talk to you, what they'll do is they'll start doing fidgety things with their hands. The common example you've probably heard before is when they start playing with their hair. This one's really obvious, guys, but by the time you've got to this point, you probably should already have known 10 times by now. Girls will typically only do this when they're very emotional during conversation. These physical things can be very specific and they change depending on the girl. You'll have a hard time perceiving these things early on. The main reason for this is because you're going to be too focused on what she's saying to also simultaneously focus on what she's doing. In my opinion, you shouldn't focus focus too much on these things, they can lead you astray. It's similar to when you first start learning how to drive a standard car. At the beginning, you're going to be so focused on the gears that you won't think about the clutch pedal or the gas pedal. With more experience, it's all going to work smoothly in synchrony. The same thing's going to apply to approaching women. For some of you guys, cold approach is going to be a great thing to do when you're first starting out. Once you learn to prepare yourself for rejection, you're not going to care so much about the outcome. Now, for me personally, I don't necessarily love the cold approach. I prefer the warm approach. The reason it's called warm approach is because you're not approaching full cold with no information. When a girl has shown you some signs of interest, that is already considered a warm approach. Let me give you an example. One time I was doing exactly what I tell you guys to do. I was sitting in a coffee shop enjoying my coffee while working on something on my laptop. Occasionally what I'll do is I'll glance up and see who's walking in and out of the coffee shop. I made a glance and I noticed this one girl walked in, and within the first 5 seconds she noticed me right away. This is when she looked at me the first time. I looked back for another 20-30 seconds. I looked up again. Then I noticed she was panning around. She looked at me a second time. I did the same thing except I did it for about 3 minutes. I looked up again, and here we go, she looked at me a third time. In this scenario, I was confident that I caught her eye and that she found me attractive. At this point, the only thing I needed to do is basically put myself around her and make up some excuse to talk. The funny thing is, this girl made it so easy for me. As I was sitting there, she walked over near my area and just stood there waiting for her coffee. The funny thing is, her coffee was on the other side of the cafe, so it made no sense for her to stand there. Of course, at this point, I knew 100%. I looked over at her and said, I think the coffee's on the other side. She laughed nervously, we started to have some small talk, we exchanged social media, and then she left. I did what I always tell you guys. I waited 3 to 5 days, I texted her, we went on a date, things went fine. I want you guys to pay attention to 2 main things here. The first is how many times she looked at me. Understand guys, that girls will rarely look at you like this for no reason. The second thing is how she positioned herself around me with no good reason. You guys have to learn how to be very perceptive of these things. These are both indicators of interest. When she gives you these signs, she's trying to make it as easy as possible for you to approach her. A third signal that comes to mind is when she laughs really loudly when you're around her. Sometimes when girls laugh really loudly, it's a sign they want the attention of a guy that's nearby. A fourth one could be that she sits down at a table right beside you. Then after she sits next to you, she might start talking with her friend about a topic that's potentially provoking. She does this because she hopes that you'll eavesdrop and then jump into the conversation. These are all warm approach signals, and I prefer this approach much better than the cold approach. The main reason for this is that it's a much better usage of your time. With cold approach, it's considered good if you can get 1 number out of 10 girls. With warm approach, you could potentially get close to 100%. All it depends on is how well you can read the signs that a girl is sending you. As you get better with women, you should be using warm approach more than cold approach. I always tell you guys you should be busy all the time. The busier you get, the less time you're going to have to just cold approach girls all day. If you're out and about anyway and you see a girl you like, sure, you can cold approach her. But in general, guys, you're not gonna have time to go spend an hour every day just cold approaching girls to get numbers. If you guys like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. And as usual, I have an extended version on Patreon if you want to go into more detail. I'll see you guys next time.